This is very encouraging. So here is Barack Obama. Well, the response is encouraging. I just want to remind you, regardless of what you think about Barack Obama, the Democratic Party under the era of Obama was decimated. The 2010 midterm elections were so decisive and destructive. Now, granted, there is a sort of a what they call it, like a secular trend where the party out of the presidency loses. But it was huge losses in 2010. And Obama may not be responsible for that, but the failure of any type of outside apparatus to mitigate that loss is his failure. The Obama administration and the Obama campaign, starting in August of 2007, or 2008, I should say, put the word out to donors, and you can go back and look this up. We were talking about it at the time. Put the word out to donors. You do not donate to outside groups. You donate only to us. And they had Obama for America, which was considered to be a huge grassroots organization that a lot of people felt had an enormous amount of power and had a lot of potential as an outside leverage for the president. And they purposefully buried the entire organization. And they left the Democratic Party. And you can also quote, "I got this," as he's telling Democratic lawmakers in some type of Democratic caucus meeting, "I got this." So he basically said, "No, don't worry. It's on me. We have debilitated all the outside organizations because we don't want any type of dissent. And I got this." And then 2010 happened, and guess what? He didn't got it.
Colby, except not.
So here he is returning to the Hill, not literally, but metaphorically, to tell the Democratic Party what they need to do. Barack Obama was great in telling the Democratic Party what he needed to do to win. But there is no evidence that Barack Obama is the guy to tell Democrats what they need to do to win, particularly not now. But also, the fact is, not then either. And this is, divorced from his policies, just as a political strategist, very good in figuring out what works for Barack Obama, not so good at what works for everybody else in the Democratic Party. The Democrats lost over 1,000 seats in state, local, federal elections.
How's this looking, Barack Obama wise?
He got it, but not the rest of us. But here he is telling the Democrats what they need to do to, you got to slow your roll now, despite what happened. That's basically the pitch.
On the other hand, I know from experience in passing the health care law that I had to work on in the United States, that was not the ideal healthcare program that I wanted to set up. It's what I could get at the time, and if I could establish the principle that everybody gets healthcare and get 20 million people more healthcare, even if 10 million still hadn't gotten it, that's what I'm going to do now. And then I'll fight some more later for the other 20%. So to go back to the point that was made by Conleth, what's true for me when I was a president or an elected official, it's going to be true for you as well, even within your own organizations. And one of the things I do worry about sometimes among progressives in the United States, maybe it's true here as well, is a certain kind of rigidity where we say, I'm sorry, this is how it's going to be. And then we start sometimes creating what's called a circular firing squad, where you start shooting at your allies because one of them is straying from purity on the issues. And when that happens, typically the overall effort and movement weakens. So I think whether you are speaking as a citizen or as a political leader or as an organizer, whether you're in the nonprofit space and civic space or you're in the political arena, you have to recognize that the way we've structured democracy requires you to take into account people who don't agree with you. And that, by definition, means you're not going to get 100% of what you want. But you should take some time to think in your own mind and continually refine and reflect, what are my core principles? Because the danger is if you don't know what your principles are, that's when you compromise your principles away. So you have to know ahead of time, here's what I'm willing to compromise on, here are the things that I'm not. You can't set up a system in which you don't compromise on anything, but you also can't operate in a system where you compromise on everything.
The problem with Obama's perspective on this is that he may have had core principles, and I frankly, I don't think they were quite ambitious enough, but nevertheless, the point is different people can have different core principles. But when you come in offering the least amount, or you come in offering basically what your compromise position is, in your first offer, you are guaranteed to get less than your compromise position. That is just like a basic tenet of negotiations, and it ends up being, in many respects, it puts into question where the core principles were.
But isn't that the problem? I think the core principles are in the process, not in the outcome.
I think that's true too.
The core principle is negotiation and having everybody at the table. That's the core principle
He
for him.
conflates the concept of democracy with the idea of what democracy is supposed to bring about. And so it's really just like he's maintaining that process, I think, is a big part of it, yes. Also, and it was not effective. I mean, we got the Affordable Care Act, but there was a lot of reason to presume that something could be done in that space, and he did not exert the effort on various players that he could have. And I would add too that they, in many respects, they sold it incorrectly, because it didn't really make things affordable.
Also, how many people does it take to make a firing squad? Because what this sounds like to me is more like Obama and the establishment Democrats kind of throwing shade on one person in particular. So if anyone's doing a circular firing squad, it's him. And AOC, yeah, but like fewer people, let's say. There are fewer mainstream elected politicians right now that are pushing what Obama is portraying as purity politics and what we understand to be practical, because we've seen market solutions to healthcare and they don't work, right?
Right. I mean, he claims it's a circular firing squad, but the shots are fired from everywhere, not just the supposed purity folks.
I mean, it was
like
his chief of staff that called progressives effing retards.
Right.
Like, what is the,
Wow, he used
what
the
is
R
the,
word?
I mean, that's the other problem too, is like, what is the basis of like where these supposed preset compromises come from? Like, this is where Brad DeLong said a couple of weeks ago,
right,
we need to understand that we're not the point people anymore because we lost.
Right. The purity is on the other foot.
Right.
On some
Precisely.
level. And the practicality is on the other foot. Here is Katie Porter, one of those Democrats who was just elected. She was elected in a what was otherwise a longtime Republican district in California. She, in many respects, she hasn't gotten quite the attention that some of the other freshman Congress people have, but she's gotten some. She was considered a sort of a Elizabeth Warren protege in some respects. Studied with her, I think, at Harvard, and also was heavily involved in the in the work that was going on in California regarding the financial crisis, or I should say the wake of the financial crisis. And here is her response to Obama's worries about the progressive rigidity hurting Democrats. And I should say that last clip we played of Obama was in Berlin, but he apparently had made a trip sometime last week or the week before to the Hill and delivered a very similar message. Don't be so ambitious.
Agree with the president, former president? I mean, is this a problem among Democrats?
I don't think we should be afraid of ideas and of new ideas. And I think if we're gonna energize the electorate, particularly millennial voters, we shouldn't be shutting down ideas. And so I think to the extent that there's been rigidity, it's been rigidity around the establishment. I'm a freshman. I'm part of a huge freshman class, and we're bringing a lot of new ideas and a lot of new voices to the Congress. And I think there's a certain amount of resistance to that from the establishment. So I think that we should not be afraid of having a dialogue and be afraid of people disagreeing with each other within the Democratic Party. It's only when it turns personal, when it turns to name calling, when it turns to dragging down other candidates, that I think it becomes a problem. But right now, I don't feel like the Congress has done that.
So here's the point that she's making, and it's one that we were just making, is that you have a circular firing squad. And what purity, what you know, like the idea is that the so-called center, the so-called moderates, and I say so-called center because there's just no way to say that they're centered, at least in terms of the American public. But the so-called moderates, let's call them just the leftish, rightish leftists in the House, their purity is pretty rigid. You know, it's just a different type of pure. The product is slightly different. And they frame it as if the product is some form of leftism, and we're gonna, we don't need it to be so pure. But the fact is that that's not the politics they have, and so they're having purity tests too. It is swaying in any way or diverging from what we have been selling and pushing for an extended period of time. This could be framed exactly the opposite way. But the way Obama does it, and the way that we always hear this done, is as if we are the norm, right, and they're the different ones. And
we're practical, they're ideological.
Right. We don't have politics. I mean, this is Howard Schultz's pitch too, right? Like, I don't have politics. I don't have ideology. I just have can-do spirit and get-it-doneism.
Common sense.
I just have common sense and a get-it-doneism.
I wonder if Dave Rubin's going to do a hashtag walk back after hearing Katie Porter talk about ideas.
Yeah, there you go.
Whoa, Katie Porter's interested. Hey, here's an idea. What if Equifax releasing information to the public was a good thing?
The way that Katie Porter frames it is also really the way to do it, too, because she's using basically their language. For the most
I agree.
part.
And it's accurate. It's absolutely.
accurate.
It's like, actually, if you go to the progressive side of that equation, that is where people are generating ideas that are not reheated 80s and 90s plans that are completely historically out of date, unnecessarily convoluted, repetitive, and uninteresting to normal people. Speaking of appealing to normies, ironically.
Physician, heal thyself.
NBC News is reporting that the U.S. Secret Service